Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaste and welcome back to the video course on watershed management. Today we will start a new module, module number 9. So, the topic is on drought management. Some of the topics covered in this module include drought assessment and classification, drought analysis techniques and drought mitigation planning. In this module, in lecture number 35, today we will discuss about drought assessment. So, some of the topics covered in today's lecture include droughts, assessment, classification, meteorological droughts, hydrological droughts, agricultural droughts, drought vulnerability. Some of the keywords for today's lecture: droughts, assessment, meteorological drought, hydrological drought and agricultural drought. So, as we were discussing about the watershed management, it is one of the important resources is water. So, it is mainly the management of water. So, as we discussed in the last module, if plenty of water is available, if the rainfall exceeds certain limits and then various drainage problem, then there is a possibility of flooding. So, that means plenty of water or excess of water is needed, water needed. So, that is the flooding problem. So, the drought is opposite to the flooding. So, where we do not have sufficient water for a long time. So, for many months or few years time, there is no sufficient rainfall, there is no sufficient water availability, either surface water or groundwater. So, that way when we discuss about the watershed management, drought is one of the important aspects which we have to see all the aspects and then how we can reduce the vulnerability of droughts as far as when we discuss about the watershed management. So, in this context, today let us discuss about the drought assessment. So, as I mentioned, the definition of a drought is an extended period of, say, it's an extended period, say maybe for months or years, when a region notes a deficiency in its water supply, whether surface or groundwater. So, that way drought means, so there is no sufficient water, say the surface water or groundwater. It is not only for few months, but say maybe number of months or so for few years. So, there is no sufficient water is available, either surface water or groundwater. So, that way we can say that a location or a watershed is say amenable to drought. So, when there is no sufficient rainfall, say for a few seasons or few years, or say even whenever sufficient rainfall is there, but say for 2-3 months and then say 7-8 months or 9 months there is no rain at all and then there is no sufficient water available. So, that way it can be short term drought or long term drought. So, this way, so droughts occurs when a region receives consistently below average precipitation. So, that way we can see that when rain is not at all taking place, say to a normal condition or average condition. So, for say a few seasons or few years. So, that way we can say that consistently below average precipitation is the condition for a watershed, then we can say that watershed is amenable to drought. So, that way there is substantial say when we look about to the drought situation. So, when we say look to the drought situation in many countries or many locations, we can see that there is substantial impact of drought on the ecosystem, agriculture, human being, flora and fauna. So, that way that affected region there is no sufficient water either in terms of surface water or groundwater. So, that is a major issue. So, even a short intense drought can cause significant damage and harm the local economy. So, as I mentioned, the drought can be for short term or for long term. So, short term means even though there was rainfall say to certain average condition, but that is for a short duration, but say for example 2-3 months of rainfall, but then 9 or 10 months of there is no rainfall or there is no sufficient water is available due to various reasons. So, then we can see that is so called short term duration. So, so that way the total watershed will be affected in terms of economy and various other conditions. So, that way the availability of water is so important as far as watershed management is concerned. So, we can see that this drought is a global phenomena. So, it is we can see it is not only in India or say in Asia, but all the countries, all the parts of the world or the earth is affected by drought. So, it is the drought is widespread and it has impacts on agriculture. So, you can see that if say agriculture needs sufficient say moisture or water. So, that way when the availability of water is not say reduced, so then agriculture will be affected. And then say when the agriculture say most of the rural economy is based upon the agriculture. So, when the agriculture is affected, then the people will be migrating from say the considered watershed to other places in search of jobs. So, that the other impact will be migration, and then human settlement will be say affected. So, if the drought is persisting for a long time, say many years, like what we can see in many of the African countries like Sudan and Chad, then you can see that the human settlement itself will be affected, and then people will be migrating to other parts of the world. So, that way say we can see this kinds of problem droughts. The droughts can be short term drought or long term droughts. So, long term drought is very detrimental. So, the total the settlement or the people will be very much affected, especially with the long term drought. So, that way when we look into droughts, so on a watershed scale, we can see that say drought is we say that there is drought when deficit supply of moisture. So, that way so it is a major natural hazards, and it results in a significant social, economical and environmental cost. So, the cost will not only in social terms, economical terms, but also environmental terms. So, that means the ecosystem will be say very much affected. So, as we can see that this is a serious problem in many of the African countries. You can see that this is a say world drought map. So, you can see that wherever this black area is there, it will say the water scarcity is too much. So, that way we can see that these are all these countries are very much drought prone, and long term effect is there as far as drought is concerned. And then this blue region like India and other regions, it is water stressed region. So, there is we can say that many locations will be having short term droughts. So, the consequences, as I mentioned, say long term consequences like agricultural production will be affected. Then whichever countries where say mainly depend upon hydropower production. So, when water is not available due to the droughts, so hydropower generation will be affected, and then total economy will be affected. So, that way the consequences are very detrimental in many of the areas, either on a say watershed basis or river basins basis or state basis or even the country wise. So, according to United Nations estimates, we can see that about 1/3 of world's population lives in areas with water shortages. So, that means you can see that in many parts of India, then China, Africa, so many, and South America, many locations, so water stress areas are there, and even 1.1 billion people lacks access to safe drinking water, and then say almost about 970 million square kilometer area is say water stressed area. So, that way the say on an annual basis we can see that about 60 billion people are affected say annually due to the droughts, and there is a gross domestic product loss of annually about 110 billion US dollars. So, that way this drought is a major disaster. So, you can see that now many developed countries like United States and European countries have done many measures to combat with the droughts, and developing countries like India, China, and then many of the South Africa and many African countries are also now looking to various say interventions to deal with either short term droughts or long term droughts. So, now let us see what are the major impacts of these droughts. So, when we look into the impacts of droughts, say most of the time it is always better to critically analyze it by preparing the contingency plans. So, we have to analyze what are the causes of droughts, and then what kind of measures can be implemented, so that the effects of droughts, impacts of droughts can be reduced. So, that way it is always better to prepare a drought contingency plan. So, it is a document that identify specific actions that can be taken say before droughts, during the droughts, and after a drought to mitigate some of the impacts and conflicts that results. So, you can see that as we discussed, impacts are there on the economy, then agriculture, then the total ecological system. So, that way when we prepare a contingency plans, we should have contingency plans to deal say before the drought situation can take place, or during the drought and after the drought. So, after the drought, what kind of measures to regenerate back the system. So, that way we have to see. So, as I mentioned, drought impacts, say drought impacts a specific effect of drought. So, there can be various types of impacts like economical impact, environmental impact, impact on the human settlement. So, people also tend to refer to impacts as consequences or outcomes. So, that is, say when we say drought impact, it can be also sometimes we can call it drought consequences or the outcome of the droughts. So, impacts are symptoms of vulnerability. So, as we discussed, so we can identify the vulnerable areas due to the droughts, and then based upon that we can have drought impacts, we can assess the drought impacts. So, drought impact assessment is the process of looking at the magnitude and the distribution of droughts effects. So, how much intensity, how much is the magnitude, say when we look into the drought, and then what will be the effects of that magnitude, say it is whether it is very strong type of drought, or the moderate, or the say what type of drought. Accordingly we can see that the impacts, and then its effects can be also analyzed. And then the next question is what are the mitigation plans. So, when we look into drought mitigation, so we can have short and long term actions, programs or policies that can be implemented in advance of droughts or in its early stages to reduce degree of risk to people, property and productive capacity. So, with various climatic conditions, we can predict in advance whether the possibility of drought is there, or even some areas are always drought prone areas, and say that kind of areas we can take earlier measures to combat these kinds of droughts. And then say for example, wherever say arid or semi arid regions, we can implement say schemes like water harvesting schemes or total watershed management plans, so that say that itself will serve as a mitigation plans, and then so that we can try to protect the people, property, and then the productive capacity of that particular watershed. So, that way on a watershed basis we can think about the drought assessment, drought impacts, and then drought mitigations plans. So, now let us look into in details what are the consequences of droughts. So, here I have listed various consequences. So, as I mentioned earlier, there are significant consequences on environment. So, environmental consequences, consequences on agriculture, then the health and economic consequences, and social consequences. So, that way we can classify the drought consequences into environmental, agricultural, health, economic and social consequences. So, say some of the important consequences I have listed here. So, say for example, agriculture is concerned. So, consequences like say when the water availability is reduced, so the crops production, the crops yield will be reduced, or even the crops itself will be affected, so that say there is possibility of famine. So, diminished crop growth. So, when the water stress takes place due to the less availability of water, so the diminished crop growth or yield productions, and then carrying capacity of the livestock like either say flora and fauna, the carrying capacity will be reduced. And then environment is concerned, say say some portion of the region become say dust bowls. So, the sandstorms will be taking place. So, like dust storms can take place. Then due to the agricultural problems, related problems, there can be famine. So, there is when the production is reduced, and then famine possibilities are there. And then say if an area becomes say drought prone, then habitat damage will take place, since water availability will be reduced, and then there will be related issues. Then as far as the health of the people is concerned, malnutrition, since due to lack of availability of food and water, good quality water, then dehydration and related diseases. So, especially in African regions, many countries like Chad, then say Ethiopia and all these regions, we can see these kinds of issues, health related issues like malnutrition, dehydration and related diseases. And then the people migrated from one country to another country, or one area to another area. So, mass migration will be the outcome of this. And then say the areas wherever the electricity production is, power production is from hydroelectric power plants, there is possibility of reduced electricity production, since sufficient water will not be available. Then shortage of water for industry. So, industrial say yield will be reduced, industrial output will be reduced, and then even there will not be water for sufficient water for domestic supply. And then all these related issues can create social unrest between the communities, and then even there can be wars between the countries, or between the states, or between the regions. And then also when the temperature rises, I mean there is no sufficient rainfall for long, say many seasons or many years, there is possibility of existing forests will be affected due to wildfires. So, that way we can see the consequences are too much as far as droughts are concerned, and it is too intense. And then when we discuss about the watershed management plans especially, we have to assess whether the concerned watershed is drought prone, and then we have to see that what kind of measures can be adopted to reduce the droughts problem, or to mitigate the drought related problems. So, now let us look into some of the issues like the risk and vulnerability related to the droughts. So, when we discuss about the risk and vulnerability, so risk is the potential adverse effects like a product of both the frequency and severity of the hazards and corresponding vulnerability. So, this is the definition of risk. So, in say the area is concerned, we have to go for risk analysis. So, based upon the potential adverse effects, and then risk analysis is the process of identifying and understanding the components associated with a drought risk and evaluation of alternative strategies. So, we can assess the what will be the risk related to the droughts, say for the particular area or particular watershed, and then we can look into alternative strategies based upon the vulnerability analysis or risk analysis. So, then the term like risk management. So, risk management is the opposite of crisis management, a proactive approach. Actually, we are looking for risk management. So, crisis management is once the situation become worse, or the things happen, then we have to see how to deal, that is crisis management. But risk management, if this particular area is say prone to risk, so then we can have advanced measures, like in advance of drought, mitigation can reduce drought impacts, and then we can have relief and recovery decisions made timely in a coordinated and effective manner. So, that way we can go for risk management. And then when we look into vulnerability, so vulnerability indicates the characteristics, activities or environments that makes them susceptible to effects of droughts. So, when we say about the drought vulnerability means, so these are the characteristics or activities that make them susceptible to effects of drought. So, we can say calculate the degree of vulnerability. So, for the particular area depending upon various conditions. So, this degree of vulnerability depends on environmental and social characteristics of the region, and is measured by ability to anticipate, cope up with, resist and recover from drought. So, when we discuss about the degree of vulnerability, we have to see that with respect to the environmental related issues or social characteristics of that particular region or particular location, we have to see that how we can say anticipate the issues, and then how we can cope up with the drought situations, or how we can resist with respect to the situation arised from the droughts, or we can, once the drought occurs, then how we can recover from the droughts. So, these kinds of questions to be answered. So, this is possible through risk analysis and vulnerability analysis related to the droughts. So, now let us look briefly into say how the which are the locations mainly drought prone or drought generally occurs. So, as I mentioned, droughts can be either short term or long term. So, the droughts, when we look into say the drought situation in at various parts of the world. So, droughts normal it is a recurring feature of the climate in most parts of the world. So, especially in many of the African countries. So, these droughts the occurs, say it is normally it is a recurring feature, and then so this is actually the drought is actually one of the earliest documented climate events. So, you can see that in many of the epics textbooks or the Bible or the Hindu textbooks or all these say epics textbooks, we can see that these droughts have been mentioned. And then say the recurrent droughts, as I mentioned, we can see in many parts of Africa, like countries like Sudan, Chad, Ethiopia, East Africa, etc. There are many countries where say year after year the droughts are there. So, decades of droughts in some of the locations, some of the countries, and in especially in Asian countries like Himalayan basins, say in monsoon season, say 3-4 months there will be severe floods, and that will be followed by drought conditions, since immediately the once the say rainfall occurs, all the water will be drained say due to the topographical nature of the region, and then next few months there is say possibility of droughts. So, these droughts are actually short term droughts, but in a country like India, Rajasthan, where arid regions or semi arid regions, we can see that these areas are very much drought prone, since generally in this region say the available rainfall is very less, even some regions just 20 centimeter average annual rainfall in states like Rajasthan. And then Gulf countries, some parts of China, and then America, say especially west coast of USA, and then Amazon basins, say for example, there was some drought in 2005, and then say largest part of Australia, these areas are arid or semi arid region. So, where normally the rainfall conditions are less, and then say the below average rainfall takes place for a number of years, then this area become very much drought prone, and then related issues will be there. And then as far as now we can see that in the last few years we are discussing about the climate change and its effects. So, we can see that due to the climate change impacts, say more areas will be affected by droughts, and then the droughts become frequently droughts may take place. So, the climate change impact assessment shows that whenever say due to the climate change, say the possibilities are that the rainfall may increase many locations, but that rainfall will be short term, and then due to the increase in the evaporation and various climatic conditions, the frequency of droughts will be increased. So, these are some of the recent assessment which we can see in the literature. So, now let us look into various causes of droughts. So, we were discussing about the consequences of droughts, occurrence of droughts. So, now let us look into what are the important causes of droughts. So, as I mentioned earlier, say mainly the important cause is that the below average rainfall in the region. So, main impact is the main cause is the rainfall effects. So, this rainfall, say wherever average annual possible rainfall conditions are not taking place, say 25% less or 50% less, like that. So, that locations become drought prone, depending upon the other conditions also. So, rainfall effects can be changes in normal pattern. So, just like reduction in presence of water vapor and its upward movements. So, say sufficient water vapor should be there and that should be upward movement should be there, that way only rainfall takes place, and if it does not take place, then rainfall will be affected. And above average prevalence of high pressure systems, then winds carrying continental rather than oceanic air masses. So, oceanic air masses means there will be say more vapor in the air masses, but if it is coming from say continental, then there will be less say the vapor. So, that way the possibility of rainfall will be reduced, and then ridges of high pressure areas. So, that way the main cause is say less rainfall taking place. So, that way these are some of the causes of this the rainfall effects. Then conditions like oceanic and atmospheric weather cycles. So, like say El Nino, Southern Oscillation, ENSO or El Nino, that kind of phenomena like make drought a regular recurring features of the various continents like Americas along the Midwest and Australia. So, this can be also not only the rainfall effects, but rainfall is the main cause, but the rainfall will be reduced, or the monsoon will be affected due to oceanic and atmospheric weather cycles. And then also like other than the natural causes like human activities also can cause this type of drought situations. So, human activities like deforestation, over farming, excessive irrigation, soil erosion, then urbanization, etc. Trigger droughts. So, that is we have a large number of examples of these kinds of problems, like say for example, in India, in some Gujarat, Kutch region and Rajasthan regions, say wherever say like deforestation, over farming, all those things taken place say on a long period, then we can see that all the adverse effects takes place, and that one of the effect is the possibility of droughts. Then say as we already discussed, the climate change effects like greenhouse gases, increase in greenhouse gases, then climate change effects and global warming are also the causes of droughts. So, generally we can say that all the effects will be the environmental degradation. So, this environmental degradation leads to the short term or long term droughts when we critically analyze the drought situation in many of the locations all over the world. So, now say with this background, now let us look into the classification of droughts. So, we can classify the droughts into 4 categories depending upon the nature or what is the after effects of the drought. So, we can classify the droughts into meteorological droughts, hydrological droughts, agricultural droughts and socio-economic droughts. So, meteorological drought actually defined by climatic variables, say like precipitation, humidity or evaporation and the duration of the dry period. So, this is actually meteorological drought is defined by these climatic variables. Then hydrological drought means it is associated with effects on surface or subsurface water supplies. So, like stream flow, reservoir, lake levels and groundwater. So, even though rainfall takes place due to various reasons, if the availability of surface water or groundwater is reduced, then there is possibility of hydrological drought. Then the third category is agricultural drought. So, this links impacts of meteorological drought to agriculture, like focusing on precipitation shortages, then differences between actual and potential evapotranspiration, soil water deficits, crop failure, etc. So, this is actually the outcome with respect to the meteorological drought. And then socio-economic drought, actually this occurs when the demand for an economic good exceeds supply as a result of a weather related shortfall in water supply. So, when water is not available, so the impacts related to social or economical say related issues. So, that generally we call it as socio-economic drought. So, now let us look into all these classifications into details. So, first one is the meteorological droughts. So, meteorological droughts, as we discussed, say whenever prolonged period with less than average precipitation takes place, then we can say that meteorological droughts takes place. So, this we can classify into three categories, say when the average the rainfall in a particular location is say 25% decrease is there with respect to the normal, that is one category. So, that is maybe we can say mild type droughts, or say when the rainfall is or the precipitation is say 50% decrease with respect to normal, then we can say moderate, and when the rainfall is say 75% decrease with respect to the normal condition, then we will say severe drought conditions. So, that way so we can define the drought situation on the basis of degree of dryness. So, in comparison to some normal or average amounts and duration of the dry spell. So, accordingly we can classify the meteorological droughts, so based on the degree of dryness. Say for example, according to the norms of Indian Meteorological Department IMD, so they have adopted the following criteria for sub classification of meteorological droughts. So, like total season rainfall is less than 75% of normal value affected by droughts. Then moderate drought is if seasonal deficiency is between 26 to 50%. Then say the third category is say say compared to this say earlier, first one is 75%, then 26 to 50%, and then less than 26 or up to 25%. So, that way mild, moderate or severe drought conditions. So, that way we can classify. So, this meteorological droughts, when we look say we can also see with respect to the probability of drought occurrence. So, if you define the probability of drought occurrence, say if it is say in a particular area, the area is said to be drought prone if the probability is between 0.2 to 0.4, and we say that that area is chronically drought prone area when the probability exceeds 0.4, and say for example, say depending upon this whether it is simply drought prone area or chronically drought prone area, we can classify the area and then see with respect to various conditions or with respect to the probability of the drought occurrence. So, say for example, in India about 33% or 1/3 of the total geographical area comes under drought prone area. So, say some areas like Rajasthan, say Gujarat, Kutch region, these regions are chronic drought prone area, and some areas are say depending upon the weather conditions or various conditions, say some part of Maharashtra, Bihar or Madhya Pradesh are say simply drought prone area. So, then this meteorological drought depends on the onset, breaks and withdrawal times of monsoon. Say for example, if we consider the monsoon condition in a country like India, so this meteorological drought will say that say what time the monsoon starts, the onset of monsoon, and whether the monsoon is continuously proceeding to the various locations of the country, or whether it breaks, or say what time it will be withdrawing, the withdrawal times of the monsoons. Accordingly, we can say that whether a meteorological drought takes place or not. So, actually Indian Meteorological Department generally predicts the rainfall conditions say before, say 1 month before the monsoon, and then they assess the drought situation with respect to various data at various location of the country. So, then a prediction of occurrence of drought is related to forecast of deficient monsoon season and its distribution. So, in India this is done by Indian Meteorological Department. So, then say as I mentioned, the meteorological drought, when we consider say severe drought if deficiency is above 50% of the normal value, and then say we say that a drought year is there when the area affected by moderate or severe drought either individually or collectively is more than 20% of the total area of the country. So, say a country like India, when we say that this is a drought year, say for example, 2002, 3 or 2009, say some of the drought years. So, we say that more than 20% of the total area of the country is affected by moderate or severe droughts. If we look into the literature, we can see that, say for example, in India, if we consider the data for between 1875 to 1991, about totally 23 drought years were there, and say for example 1918 being the worst year of the drought, say 70% of the area of the country was affected in 1918. And then say this drought, when we talk is say two concurrent or consecutive years, drought years, then it is becoming a severe problem. So, say for example, in India 1904 and 1905, 2 years were drought periods, and then 1965 and 66 were drought years. So, actually even though this occurs rarely, but if it happens, then the condition becomes very bad as far as the economical situation and various other conditions as far as the drought impacts are concerned. So, now next category is the hydrological droughts. So, hydrological droughts actually brought about when the water reserves available in sources such as aquifers, lakes and reservoirs fall below the statistical average. So, we can have a statistical average like if you consider reservoir, groundwater aquifer systems like that. So, we say that there is a hydrological drought when the water levels in these storage systems goes fall below the statistical average. So, this can be due to various reasons, as I mentioned, say in Konkan region in Maharashtra. So, even though heavy rainfall takes place during the monsoon season, but immediately after the rainfall, all the water will be drained due to the topography of the region. So, then there is say hydrological drought will be there next say 6 months like that. So, this hydrological drought means below average values of stream flow, then condense in tanks, ponds and reservoirs, groundwater and soil moisture. So, all this will be less than the average values or minimal mean values. So, that way when we look into hydrological droughts, we can say 4 components of hydrological droughts. We can see there are 4 components of hydrological droughts, like what is the magnitude. So, how much is the deficiency with respect to the statistical average in the reservoirs or other storage systems. Then how much duration, whether it is say 6 months, 3 months like that, and then what is the severity, say like cumulative amount of deficiency, how much is the deficiency taking place. So, and then what is the frequency of occurrence. So, whether it occurs say every year or once in 10 years like that. So, that way we can say ascertain the hydrological droughts. So, these hydrological droughts, that way we can classify into surface water deficit and groundwater deficit. So, surface water aspects when we look into with respect to hydrological droughts. So, the surface water aspects of drought studies related to stream flow and following techniques are commonly adopted, like say whether through the river or to the reservoir or in the pond, what is the level of water. So, like low flow duration curves or low flow frequency analysis or stream flow modeling. So, all this indicates the surface water aspects. So, the importance of this surface water assessment or aspect is, say when we look into design and operation of reservoirs, we have to see the possibility of this type of hydrological droughts. Then diversion of streams for irrigation, say when we are diverting the water from one river basin to another river basin or one watershed to another watershed, we have to see. And then power, whether the electric power is produced from hydropower, then we have to see its related issues, and then availability of drinking water, and then water quality. So, when the level in the rivers or the water level goes down or the reservoir levels goes down, then we can see the water quality will be affected. So, all these issues we have to see with respect to the surface water aspects, and with respect to the groundwater aspects, we have to see the quantity, the water level going down in the aquifer system, so that the wells become dry, and then also the quality of the water will be also affected with respect to the groundwater aspects. So, these are the issues related to the hydrological droughts. So, now the third classification is the agricultural droughts. So, droughts that affect crop production or the ecology of the range, so that is so called agricultural droughts. So, the principal criteria is the deficiency of rainfall or deficiency of the soil moisture, so that the crops cannot grow properly, and then yield will be reduced or the crop will be died. So, a variety of definitions for drought studies. At plant level we can put like root level or regional level, or the with respect to soil moisture condition level, or the evaporation level, like that. So, not only regional specific, but also crop and soil specific, and this considers crop growth and water requirement. So, say for example, in India, when we look into the kharif crop or the rabi crop, say kharif crop is during the monsoon time and rabi is after the monsoon time. So, now especially in the rabi season, the crops mainly depends upon the soil moisture available, and then if there is no irrigation, then we have to see say how much water is available, and then with respect to the soil moisture available, how the crop growth is affected. So, this is with respect to time scale for water efficiency in agricultural drought. So, this may be for shorter periods compared to the hydrological or meteorological drought studies. So, when we look into the agricultural droughts, we can derive an index called aridity index. So, actually this aridity index is a numerical indicator of the degree of dryness of the climate at a given location. So, the aridity index indicates how severe is the agricultural drought. So, there are a number of definitions available for aridity index. One of the commonly used definition is, say aridity index is equal to potential evapotranspiration minus actual evapotranspiration divided by potential evapotranspiration multiplied by 100. So, the aridity index we can calculate either on a weekly basis or say once in 2 weeks, like that. And it is an indication of possible moisture stress experienced by the crops. So, we have to calculate the potential evapotranspiration by equipments like lysimeter in particular region, and then based upon that these calculations we can find the aridity index. So, aridity index anomaly, actually it shows the departure of aridity index from its corresponding normal value represents the moisture shortage. So, when the moisture shortage is taking place, then the crop will be affected, crop will be water stressed, and then the crop yield will be affected. So, accordingly this aridity index, say with respect to the aridity index, we can say that when it is varying from 1 to 25, we can say it is mild arid, and then 26 to 50 we can say it is moderate arid, and then when it is greater than 50 we can say it is severe arid. So, and then some other indexes like Palmer index, say which shows monthly moisture conditions and how it is departing from normal or conditions. It is actually a short term drought and wetness, and then moisture availability index. So, these are all used to identify whether the particular area is say that area agriculture drought is there, and then accordingly say whether it is short term or long term, we have to go for various mitigation measures. Say for example, Indian Meteorological Department IMD produces aridity index anomaly maps of India on a weekly basis based on data from 169 stations spread over the country. So, say these stations are in various agroclimatic zones, and then this aridity index will give an indication say how the crops will be affected, whether the crops are water stressed, and then whether corresponding agricultural droughts possibilities are there or not. So, that way this aridity index are useful in planning and management of agricultural operations. And recently now we can use remote sensing techniques also to identify whether there is agricultural droughts or whether the area is arid. Say through the with remotely sensed data, we can say it can be either microwave or specific type of say remote sensing data. So that shows the soil moisture variation in the soil. So this can be used for monitoring the agricultural droughts. So this is about the agricultural droughts. So now let us look into the socio-economic droughts. Actually, socio-economic drought is not a real classification drought, but what will be the impacts with respect to the either meteorological drought or the hydrological drought or the agricultural drought. So what will be the effect on so what will be the social effects or the economical effects. So that is we are trying to indicate by socio-economic droughts. So socio-economic drought are associated, so it is associated with the supply and demand of some economic goods with elements of meteorological, hydrological and agricultural droughts. So with respect to these meteorological, hydrological or agricultural droughts, we are coming with the conditions of socio-economic droughts. So the socio-economic droughts occur, say occurrence depends on the time and space process of supply and demand to identify or classify the droughts. So what time the droughts takes place or how much time it takes place and what location. So accordingly the socio-economic droughts occurrence will be there. So water, forage, food grains, fish and hydroelectric power. So all these say depends upon weather, and then correspondingly the variations say the economical say the activities will be depending upon that. So that way when the water availability is say reduced due to the droughts, so then economical impacts will be there. So then corresponding economic drought and then corresponding social effects will be there, that is the social economic drought. So the demand for an economic good exceeds supply as a result of a weather related shortfall in water supply, then we say that there is occurrence of socio-economic drought. So that way say say we have to assess with respect to the drought situation how the economical impacts will be there, and then what are the social impacts, and then corresponding consequences we have to analyze, and then we have to see the remediation or mitigation measures. So that way when we look into the socio-economic droughts, the consequences are reducing hydroelectric power production, required the government to convert to more expensive imported petroleum and stringent energy conservation measures to meet the power needs. Say for example, if it is the area, the location, the power production is through hydroelectric power plants, then a demand for economic goods increases when population or per capita consumption increases, say that can be another consequences. Then increase in supply by adopting efficient technologies for production, construction or construction of reservoirs, we can reduce the impacts. Then relative rate of change like a critical factor, if both are increasing, say is demand increasing more rapidly than supply, then we can see the relative rate of change, how it is taking place. Then above criterion for future predictions, or depending upon the consequences or the demand for economic goods. So accordingly say we can assess the socio-economical impacts and corresponding socio-economic drought situation for the particular watershed or particular region. So now say we have seen the classifications with respect to droughts. So now let us look what are the impacts and then the vulnerabilities. So we discussed this aspect earlier also. We defined the risk and vulnerability. So the drought risk is based on a combination of frequency, severity and spatial extent of drought. So as a physical nature of drought, and a degree of to which a population or activity is vulnerable to the effects of droughts. So as we discussed, so this is a combination of say frequency, severity and spatial extent. Then degree of region's vulnerability depends on the environmental and social characteristics of the region. So, what are the environmental effects, say what are the social effects. So, accordingly we have to define the degree of the degree of vulnerability of that particular region. So, we have to investigate the drought vulnerability. So, first we can identify the relevant drought impacts and the trends over time, and then we can rank the significant drought impacts with respect to the conditions, and then we can investigate the underlying causes of drought impacts. So, that way we can have we can investigate the drought situation, and then we can come up with say vulnerabilities, and then even we can produce a vulnerability maps. So, when we discuss the drought vulnerability, so we have to identify the relevant drought impacts and trends. So, like impacts are often symptoms of other underlying problems like vulnerabilities. So, for example, drought impact reporter developed by United States of America. So, this drought impact reporter shows how the system, whether particular area is vulnerable or not. Then we can have a ranking. So, ranking drought impacts. So, like ranking based upon the cause, areal extent, trends over time, public opinion, fairness and ability of affected area to recover. So, according to various parameters, we can produce a ranking, and this ranking ensure equitable policy formulation. So, like say economical helps or economical fund of say particular funding for particular region. So, we can have this kinds of ranking, and so that we can have equitable policy formulation that helps say for public and community advisory committees and groups so of relevant scientists and policy makers. So, this kinds of ranking of drought impact is very important. So, for example, drought impact ranking metrics we can have at the state or community level, business or individual scale, and that from that we can easily identify what will be the possibility of the particular area affected to be affected by the drought, and what is that rank. So, then accordingly the various mitigation measures or economical measures we can go for. So, when we discuss about drought vulnerability analysis, so we have to investigate the underlying causes of drought impacts, as we already discussed. So, drought vulnerability analysis provides a framework for identifying the social, economic and environmental causes of drought impacts. So, all these issues we have already discussed earlier. So, then we may have to give some direct attention to underlying causes than to its results. So, what are the causes? So, according to the causes, say we have to go for the mitigations or the remediations. So, first we have to identify the causes, then only to the results. So, that causes, say for example, if we can go for say water conservation or rainwater harvesting or build a dam. So, what kind of direct attention is needed. So, once drought risk is assessed, action to mitigate the drought impacts we can look. So, for example, reduced crop yield due to lack of precipitation. So, then the results of vulnerability analysis, the farmers did not use drought resistant seeds because they did not believe them to be useful, or costs were too high, or because of some commitment to cultural beliefs. So, we have to say what I am saying, we have to identify the causes, and then we have to see what is the vulnerability as far as the drought is concerned, and then we have to come up with the mitigation measures. So, that way the drought impact assessment is very important. So, based upon this drought impact assessment only we can generate the vulnerability maps. So, the impact assessment examines the consequences of a given event or change. So, drought impact assessments actually are useful identification of direct consequences and indirect consequences. As far as drought is concerned, there are certain direct consequences, like directly the water availability will be reduced, and then agriculture yield will be reduced, and then indirect consequences will be the total ecological system will be affected. So, the flora and fauna will be affected like that. So, direct consequences of the drought like reduced crop yield, livestock losses and reservoir depletion. So, these are some of the direct consequences, and then secondary consequences or the indirect consequences, then corresponding social effects. So, the people will be affected, the society will be affected. Then the initial assessment identify the drought impacts, but does not identify the underlying reasons for these impacts. So, we can have an initial assessment as far as the drought situation is concerned, and then we can go for a final assessment based upon the initial assessment by critically studying various aspects, so that the drought impact can be properly assessed. So, when we look into the drought impacts, so we have already discussed there are mainly three common types of impacts, like first one is the economic impacts, second one is social impacts, third one is the environmental impacts. So, the economic impacts as we discussed can be agricultural, industrial, so tourism related, energy related, financial or transportation related. So, these are some of the important economical impacts. Then social impacts like the social stress or the health of the people are affected, then malnutrition, then there is no facility for recreation, then public safety is affected, then the cultural and aesthetic values are affected. So, these are some of the social impacts of the droughts. Then when we look into environmental impacts like the flora and fauna are affected, the planet, the area is affected, ecosystem is affected, then if the wetland is affected, then surface water and groundwater qualities are affected. So, like that. So, the number of environmental impacts will be there. So, say when we look into the drought assessments, we can produce say various tables in tabular forms, various parameters, and then we can come up with a checklist, whether the with respect to various condition, whether it is there a historical situation is there or current how it is, or there is potential drought. So, that way say a checklist selection can be based upon either a common or extreme droughts or combination of the two, and then historical droughts that identify the drought of record for the area and to assess the impacts of that drought. Then a current drought, like with the current knowledge that you have about your local area, if another drought of record were to occur tomorrow, or what the local impacts may be, and then record them on the checklist under the current column. Then potential droughts like that speculate what the impacts of the same drought would be for the area in 5 or 10 years time, and then record this in the potential column. So, that way we can come up with a checklist with respect to the drought when we look into the drought impact assessments, and then with respect to the conditions like severe, moderate or low impacts, or we can put with a historical drought situation, current drought situation, or the area is potential drought situation. So, that way say for example, here this checklists are taken from Western Drought Coordination Council of United States. So, here they have put economic assessments. So, the checklist for economic impacts. So, like loss from crop production, various columns are there, then loss from dairy and livestock production. So, the columns are given like what is the historical situation, what is the current situation, then what is the potential drought situation. So, we can give ranks for each of these, and then see whether the area is say historically drought prone area or current drought is there, or the area is potentially drought prone. Then say with respect to the environmental impacts, this is also taken from Western Drought Coordination Council website. So, there environmental related issues like damage to animal species, then damage to plant species, and loss of wetlands, wind and water erosion of soils. So, like that. Here again we can have the checklist like historical situation, current and potential. So, that way we can put the tick mark or checklist, and then we can come up whether the area is how much drought prone, and we can have the drought assessment. And then if you consider the social impacts are concerned, then the social impacts like mental and physical stress, then health related low flow problems, reductions in nutrition, then loss of human life, then public safety from forest and range fires, like that. So, this is a checklist for social impacts, and whether it is with respect to historical or current or potential, what are the possibilities. So, this checklist shows how the system will be behaving. So, that way we can have the checklist, and then we can assess the drought. And as far as drought assessment is concerned, say around the world various agencies assess the drought situations, not only drought, other natural hazards like earthquake, tsunami, and other flooding, etc. All these disasters, but drought is also one of the disaster which various agencies are monitoring, like National Climatic Data Center, then say NCDC, then International Research Institute for Climate Prediction, then Center for International Disaster Information, then Relief United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent societies. So, all these agencies with respect to various parameters, with respect to various checklists, they assess the various locations, whether it is drought prone or how much severity can be there with respect to drought. So, all these situations they will be assessed, and then it will be put there in their website, and from that also their websites we can identify a particular region or particular area is drought prone, and related drought assessment can be done. So, we are discussing today the drought assessment and related issues. So, some of the important references used for today's lecture are listed here. Then before closing down, few questions like total question like a study critically the drought problems in India, analyze the causes of droughts in India, then what are the consequences of these droughts, how the drought vulnerability can be assessed. So, these details you can get through from various websites of Ministry of Water Resource, Environmental Ministry, Agriculture Ministry, like that. Then say a few questions for self evaluation, what is drought and what are its impacts, discuss the drought occurrences at different parts of the world, what are the major classifications of drought, illustrate hydrological droughts and related issues, describe socio-economic droughts, discuss drought vulnerability analysis. Then few assignment questions, what are the major consequences of droughts, what are the important causes of droughts, discuss the meteorological drought and related issues, what is agricultural drought and how to classify it, what are the common types of drought impacts. So, say today we are discussing about the droughts and its consequences, and then the classification of droughts, and then how we can do the drought assessment.